Hey everybody, it's Jeff, and this is another installment of the most interesting coin auctions. And typically I put these out Sunday evening, but this is coming out Friday afternoon because this week both Legend and Heritage offered two major auctions. There were some very interesting outcomes of which you could see some of the coins I'm going to touch on. So let's jump right into it. To start, I kind of want to give a market pulse, what was hot and what wasn't. And it was really interesting to kind of see how the market developed, and really, what is super hot right now are incredibly nicely toned coins, especially those under $10,000. And really, almost all coins under $10,000 outperformed both the estimates from Heritage and Legend and also the recent sales. Almost all of those coins were up from their most recent comparable sale, some up 50 to 100%, if not more. But not everything is hot right now. What isn't are surprisingly the major rarities, over 75,000. There were quite a bit of disappointments, which I'm going to highlight here, that will absolutely surprise you. I feel like for about 7 or 8 years, anything that was over 100,000 performed well, and anything that was under 5,000 performed terribly. And I feel like we're starting to see the reverse of that as the ultra rarities are not performing well. And another series in almost a disaster mode is the full step Jefferson nickels. They were underperforming left and right. But just to put it in perspective, 15 of the 15 Jefferson nickels listed on the Legend auctions finished below or even well below the estimates. So many of these coins were actually purchased in the last few months and tried to be flipped onto Legend auctions. And the buyer of those coins, who mostly bought them on great collections in October, November of 2020 and tried to sell them here, paid the price. He probably lost 40% of his investment just in that flip. Speaking of, let's jump into what I like to call auction zero. This was the good try auction. And as you notice, the pre-sale estimate was $15,000 to $18,000. The starting bid was $9,000. But for those who don't know, this coin does not sell for even remotely close to that. Actually, this exact coin, as you see, look at the certification number, the exact same, sold on October 25th of 2020 for just $4,170 on Great Collections. And then they flipped it to Legend and had a starting bid of 9,000. Like, holy smokes. If somebody actually took the bait and bought that, that would have been a quick $5,000 profit on a series that is in very much decline right now. So I thought that was a really interesting article. Now, of course, the lot was passed. Nobody bought it. So effectively, the owner of this coin still owns it. But I thought that was interesting. Jump into the next auction. Here's an example of a toner. Now, what I find interesting with some of these tone proofs, if you just look at the picture, it looks dark. It's really hard to tell if this is a truly nicely toned coin or just a dark tone coin. And honestly, the grade's fairly menial. The pre-show estimates were just 325 PCGS value, or the estimate was 450 to 500. But what's interesting is you look at this coin and you quickly see how amazing it is. I mean, look at those rings of rainbows going in and out. This is why TrueView, in my opinion, is the best $5 ever spent if you have a monster tone coin. It just adds so much value. How much, you ask? This coin sold for $3,642. Absolutely blew the estimate out of the water. This is a representation of how hot the supertone market is right now. Jumping to the next auction. Again, this is a fairly basic Buffalo nickel proof. This is the Proof 66 in 1937. I believe it's the brilliant version, although they don't specifically state that. 1937 had both a satin proof, which looks very much like a standard Buffalo nickel, and then the brilliant proof, which is highly mirrored. If you look at one that doesn't have any toning, it is a true mirror through and through. And this one had a pre-show estimate of around 1,100 to 1,250, which is right in line with non-toned versions and where they sell for. You see the PCGS value of 1,350. However, there is no TrueView, but kudos to Legend Auctions. They did a good job capturing this coin. And as you can see, when the light hits it just right, there is a rainbow of colors circulating this coin. It's just absolutely awesome. I think they called this neon toned coin, which is quite true. And of course, it's original because it has the CAC sticker on it. And this coin ended up selling for $3,172, triple the estimate. The third auction, of course, one of the most famous mint errors was the production in 1943 in copper as opposed to steel, as they referred to it as the bronze cents. There's just not that many in existence. This is actually the highest grade, as you could see in the PCGS pop report, pop 1, none higher. But this falls into the major rarities. Obviously, a $500,000 PCGS price guide. This doesn't sell very often. This coin ended up selling for $372,000, which obviously is an absolute ton of money. That's a house. However, let's compare it to previous sales and see if this actually is a good value or not. And the only real way is to go back of the 5 total PCGS graded AU55 and higher. We're going to focus in on the 3 most recent, which, as you could see, date back to 2014. And if you compare those 3 versus both the PCGS value, which is what I like to look at, and then compared to themselves on the AU58, you start to notice there's a definitive downtrend in how this coin is sold versus PCGS value. What I mean is, as you notice on the AU55 in the very bottom of this list, that at one point sold for 110% of PCGS value, whereas today, the most recent sale sold for just 74%. So it's interesting to see this coin be on the downtrend that it is, and that it's sold for a material drop from the PCGS value. Jumping to the next auction, this coin is an absolute monster. It is the first year of the Cat Bus quarter. And not only is it the first year, but this is the nicest coin in existence, or at least known, between NGC and PCGS. As you can see, the NGC price guide of $380,000. And of course, this is their top pop, 67 plus star. And the star is well deserved. Obviously, that's some quite nice toning. I'm not a great grader on these coins, so I'm assuming 67 plus is a fair grade since CAC gave it a CAC sticker. So as you could tell, this is a monster in all rights. And to make things even more interesting, the highest PCGS grade is just 66 plus, which I admit it is honestly kind of rare that NGC holder is the one true top pop coin. You tend to see it in reverse. So it's nice to see on occasion that NGC is won out in some of these super rarities. However, this coin sold for $198,000, a full 100 grand less than the NGC price guide. Now, those price guides tend to be inflated, so that's not always a fair comparison. Let's compare it differently. As you notice, this is the same coin, right? Well, this coin sold November 16th of 2013. That's almost 7.5 years ago. I mean, that's a long time to hold a coin like this. There's a belief in the industry that I've seen that these super rarities, if you hold them long enough, they should go up in value. However, they bought this for $282,000 and just recently sold it for $198,000. That's a 30% drop, or about an $84,000 loss on this coin. So, youch. Next up on auction 5, this is a really interesting comparison. If you remember my video from last week, you might recall there was a 17D in a mint state 65 plus holder. This is a fairly rare coin. As you can see, there's only 5 graded with 6 higher. Has a PCGS price guide of $14,500, yet 2 have traded hands in the last 7 days, which is really quite astonishing. This one ended up selling for $10,800. But what's really intriguing, let's compare it to the exact same coin that sold last week. The only difference, as you notice in the coin that sold last week, which is on the right, is the CAC sticker. That coin also sold on Great Collections, whereas this one sold on Heritage. May or may not have been an impact. This Simpson coin, typically that kind of pedigree might add value versus one that has no pedigree at all, but that's a very subjective perspective. The 65 plus having the CAC is important. I think the 65 plus with the CAC definitely looks nicer. It doesn't have that somewhat dark toning. It appears to have better luster. But when you think about what's maybe a fair spread for a CAC sticker, maybe 20 or 30% at most, not this coin. If you recall, the Great Collections coin sold for an astonishing $32,000, whereas the Simpson coin sold for just $10,800. 1/3 the value on an identical graded coin. Only difference is the CAC sticker. I mean, that's crazy. That's one, CAC doesn't deserve that kind of premium. In my opinion, is maybe right time and you just happen to have gotten two bidders that went crazy. Auction number 6. This is another very interesting one because we just had an 1895 proof trade last week on Great Collections from the video I talked about last week. This, on the other hand, though, is an astonishing one. I mean, this is a monster in all rights. It's not top pop. As you can see, there's 7 in the grade and 13 higher, but it's rare that you see an 1895, let alone a proof 66 with a cameo. And then you add on that extremely nice toning from the True View. Now, this is a circumstance where I feel like when you don't see the True View and you just look at the slab where the light's not hitting it just right, it has that dark look to it, which may or may not be appealing to some. This is where the True View looks way better than the actual picture. You can see the PCGS price guide of $125,000. Well, this one sold for $93,000. How does that compare? Well, let's go through an example here. The nice thing is we actually have a Proof 66 cameo that did trade hands back in March of 2019. That was quite a while ago. That's almost 2+ years ago. But that one sold for $120,000. So you compare it to the March 2019 sale, and that's down 22% for a coin that, in my opinion, is much nicer, toning at least. And the $120,000 was right in line with the PCGS value, whereas this one was just 74% of that. And what's more interesting is the coin we looked at last week was a Proof 40, obviously no cameo. As you can see, it sold February 21st, 2021, and that sold for $40,500. And that PCGS value was $38,500. If you got that much money, you could afford a $40,000 coin. You might be in a similar camp of a $40,000 to $90,000 coin. And in my opinion, I would have rather spent $90,000 on this toned Proof 66 cameo than $40,000 on a Proof 40. I just found that very interesting. I don't know how to analyze the sale other than the Simpson coin did not sell as well as some of the comparables. That is all I have. I appreciate you watching. I would love a like and a subscribe. Take care.